The Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos that Avraham Avinu was tested through 10 tests. And we had mentioned when the Torah refers to the community of Choran as Ur Kasdim, the kiln of Kasdim, the Midrash tells us that Avram was given an ultimatum by the king who was known as Nimrod, that either bow to the idol or he's going to be thrown into the kiln. And he would not bow, he was thrown into the kiln, miraculously came out alive. The question is that the first test? Or is that's not counted as the first test? The Rambam, in his commentary on Pirkei Avos, and Rabbi Yonah, in his commentary, says, the Ur Kasdim was not the first test. The first test was, God comes to Avraham and he says, go from your homeland, from your birthplace, from your father's household, go to the land that I will show you. That was the first test. Going into the kiln to die or not to die, that was not the first test. That was not a test for Avraham. The first test is, does he leave his homeland and his family and his birthplace to go to this unknown destination or not? So the obvious question is, how could that not be a test? As we mentioned, Avraham was a Noahide. A Jew, if he's given an ultimatum to bow to the idol or die, you have an obligation to die, because a Jew has an obligation to sanctify God's name and not desecrate God's name. Therefore, you have an obligation to go into the kiln. Avraham was not a Jew. Avraham's classification status was he was a Noahide. Being a Noahide, he had no obligation to die. So if he has no obligation to die, how could I consider that a test? He has no obligation to die. That was his choice. He chose. Rather than being an idolater, a pagan, he's going to the kiln. Therefore, maybe you say that's the reason why it's not counted as one of the tests. Because it was something he wasn't obligated, and he chose to give his life for something that he wasn't obligated. Therefore, Rambam and Rabbi Yonah, they don't count it as a test. The first test is when he was told by God, leave your homeland, your birthplace, and your father's household to this unknown destination. That's a test. But the question is, the Ur Kasdim, as we quoted the Midrash yesterday, God says that if you go into that kiln and give your life for me, then you are part of eternity. You will be the founding father of the Jewish people. So if that's the case, it has tremendous value. Do you do it? Don't you do it? Avraham says, I will do it. But this went on in his own mind. He wasn't a prophet yet. Not God directly came and communicated this to him. But that lied within this challenge that was presented to him. Should I give my life because that's what I should do? It's the right thing, although I'm not obligated or not. But how could that not be considered a test? Now, if you read the background of Avram's relationship with his countrymen and with his family, we mentioned yesterday that Avram's father was an idol manufacturer. And he had smashed the idols, and his father had informed on his own son to the king what he had done. Even though he understood, it means his son probably be put to death. How much love was there lost between Avram and his father? If this is what kind of father he has, that his father is able to give him over even to be put to death, evidently there's not much love between the two of them. So God says, leave your father's household. You know something? Give me the first ticket I'm out of here. I'm running from this. What about his countrymen? Avraham Avinu was a fugitive. He was despised by his countrymen because he was some kind of fanatic espousing monotheism, which the world could not tolerate. It was considered sacrilegious. It was anti-paganism. You deserve to be put to death. And Avram hid in the cave for 13 years just to protect his life. And God says, leave your birthplace. I'm despised, I'm hated, I'm pursued. And go to the land that I will show you, and you'll have wealth, you'll have fame, and you'll have children, which you don't have any of that at this moment. Who would not go? Who would not go? But yet, nobody disagrees. God telling him to leave his birthplace, homeland, and father's household, that is a test. In what context do we understand that to be a test? Now, there's a beautiful midrash. Avraham Avinu, he had a phenomenal capacity. There was no one who Avraham Avinu would enter into a theological dialogue with, which he was not able to refute that person's position and convince him to monotheism. That's how overpowering Avraham was. His personality, his intellectualism, his presence. And he always succeeded. Avraham, after he came out of Ur-Kasdim, the kill of Kasdim, Avraham saw tremendous opportunity to do outreach. Because he was a proven entity that there's something special about him. Whoever heard of a person going through a fire, coming out alive? That means he has a terrific backer. God's his backer. So he figured he's going to do outreach in Mesopotamia. God comes to him and says, no, you must leave this location, your homeland, your birthplace, and your father's household. Go to the land I will show you. So the Midrash says, what is it analogous to? What is it analogous to? A person has a flask with perfume. This perfume gives off a fragrance, one of a kind. But you know where the person put the flask of perfume? In a cemetery. In a cemetery, there's nobody who could benefit from the fragrance of that perfume. So what do you say to that person? You're wasting your time. If you want people to benefit from this, take it from among the dead and put it among the living. Then you'll be beneficiaries of the fragrance of the perfume. So God says to Avraham, in Mesopotamia, the people are shut down to spirituality. They have no capacity to be influenced by you. If you want to really be effective, you go to the land that I will show you. And you will, for that, you will merit children, fame, and wealth. Here, you're totally ineffective. This is God speaking to him. This is a prophecy, a communication of God. You know what Avraham does? The moment he hears that, he picks himself up, leaves to go to that unknown location. So what's the test? But he's despised. His father gives him over to be killed. His countrymen, they pursue him. He's a fugitive for 13 years in the cave. What did Avraham understand? Avraham understood why does his father give him over to be killed? Because his father has a mistaken understanding of who the master of the world is. But if he himself is able to convince his father that his position is unfounded and monotheism is the way to go, his father will love him, not hate him. It was only due to a misunderstanding. That's why his father did what he did. Now, a human being has an obligation, if he's a beneficiary of good, to reciprocate to the one who had provided that good to him and endowed him with many special endowments. Avraham Avinu, Abraham, felt a level of gratitude and indebtedness to his father. He owed him his life. He only exists, and he only was able to come upon the truth he did because his father brought him into this world. There's no stone that he'll leave unturned not to bring his father back to monotheism. And he has the ability. As I said, he had the intellectualism, he had the presence. Takes time, doesn't happen overnight. And especially, he has a sense of gratitude to his father, which cannot be explained. So what does God say to him? Avraham, you're wasting your time. Pick yourself up, go. What should Avraham said to God, let me try one more time. Give me one more chance. My countrymen, we're all beneficiaries of our environments. Even to learn what we shouldn't do, you're a beneficiary. So not only am I beholding to my father for everything, what about the location where I was born? What I was exposed to? We're a makeup of all our experiences now in life. Of my countrymen, my debt of gratitude to all of them. I feel I can make a difference. God says, you're in the cemetery. They're equivalent, they're all corpses. You cannot affect them. Avraham should have said, let me try just once. Give me one more chance. Avraham didn't say a word. The moment God says it's hopeless, he picked himself up and left. That was the test. The test was not, do I listen, don't I listen? The test is, I'm totally negated to God's will, that I don't even question it, regardless of the overwhelming level of gratitude and indebtedness I have. Despite that, I leave. That's the test. So going into the kiln, not going to the kiln, that's on a personal level. Could you imagine the Chafetz Chaim, who was a holy sage, devout, holy, divinely inspired, if he would be offered all the money in the world to eat a ham sandwich, do you think he would eat a ham sandwich? They think that's a test. It's not a test. The level Avraham was, it's not a test. If the Chafetz Chaim's not a test, Avraham's not a test. Avraham dedicated his life to monotheism. Going into the kiln, not being the pagan, for Avraham, this wasn't a great accomplishment. It's understood that's what he does. Of course, if you believe at the level he believed, it's not worth living to live a falsehood, a pagan life. For Avraham, that test is so-called an easy one. But to be negated to the degree where I don't question God, when he says it's hopeless, and I say, because of my overwhelming level of indebtedness, I feel, give me one more chance. And even that he accepts. Despite his indebtedness, he succeeded. He withstood the challenge. And that's the test of what? Leave your homeland, your birthplace, and your father's household. The others learn, and that's the way the Rambam understands it, and Rabbi Yonah. Therefore, the Ur Kasdim going into the kiln, coming out of the kiln, was not counted as one of the tests of Avraham, because it was a different degree of test. There's something interesting. Nimrod was the one who actually decreed Avraham should go into the kiln if he doesn't bow. Now, Avraham came out of the kiln. When Avraham came out of the kiln, what should have Nimrod said? God is the true God. Paganism is baseless and false. But evidently, he wasn't sufficiently impressed to embrace monotheism. Why? Now, Avraham had a brother. His name was Haran. Haran was the father of Lot. He was the father of his wife, Sarah. Lot and Sarah were brother and sister. And Haran was vacillating. He didn't know. Should he accept monotheism as his older brother was espousing? Well, no. Maybe he should follow the pagan beliefs of his family and of the world. So what did he say? I'm going to stand on the sidelines. If my brother goes into the kiln and comes out alive, that proves his position is correct. That there is a monotheistic God. And all the deities are only manifestation of God's will. If he perishes in the fire, that means that it's the deities, it's not monotheism. So he stands there, sees what happens. His brother comes out. So Nimrod says to his brother Haran, Mr. Haran, what do you say? Do you bow or do you go in? Haran says, I go into the fire. I will not bow. What if he happens? He goes into the fire, he doesn't come out. So what does Nimrod say? You see, coming out of the fire doesn't mean that there's a monotheistic God. There are many things in life we don't have the answers to. There's a thing called the fluke. It's a fluke. How? I don't know. But to change my position of paganism, to accept something which to me is unacceptable because of one incident that happens, proof of the pudding is his brother went in because he said he believed. He didn't come out. Wanted to come out. Wanted God save him. If there is that God, that proves that this is something which is an exception to the rule. Proves nothing. A well-weathered person to anything says he's not impressed until, as some professed atheist says, I need empirical evidence. Until it's empirically proven to me, I don't change my position. It's not enough. So Nimrod, who is the world leader of paganism, he's not changing his position unless he's convinced beyond doubt that there's a monotheistic being. This itself just threw a monkey wrench in the whole picture because Haran did not come out, and therefore it proves nothing. Now the question is, why didn't Haran come out? So it's very interesting. The Midrash tells us that if a person puts himself in the position with the intention that he wants a miracle to be performed on his behalf, God will not perform that miracle. Will not perform the miracle on the behalf of that person. It's only the person who does something, even to die. For that person, God won't necessarily perform the miracle, but that person has relevance to be worthy of a miracle. When Haran went into that fire, why did he go in? Because he thought and believed, as Avraham went in, he came out alive. He's coming out alive. The obvious difference is when Avraham went in to the fire, he didn't know he was coming out alive. So he went to die to sanctify God's name. When Haran went into the fire, he went into the fire to come out of the fire, as Avraham did. If that's the case, he doesn't merit a miracle. And therefore he perished in the fire. That's firstly. Secondly, there's a famous midrash based on a verse in Prophets. The prophet says that Yaakov, had redeemed Avraham. How did Yaakov redeem Avraham? Avraham did something which was phenomenal, to give his life for God. So if that's the case, he should have perished, have his share in the world to come. There's nothing more valuable in a person's life. He deserves eternity. The answer is, because if Avraham perishes in the fire, and he hasn't yet fathered a child, there's no Yitzchak. And if there's no Yitzchak, there's no Yaakov. Yaakov is the most special patriarch who fathers the Jewish people. So if the objective of creation is there should be a Jewish people to accept the Torah at Sinai, so Avraham can't perish in the fire. Avraham in his own right, it's okay if he perishes. He will have that special place in the world to come. But God can't allow him or doesn't want him to die because he yet has to have Yitzchak to be the second patriarch to father the third patriarch. Because ultimately, there has to be a Jewish people that has to come into existence. That's the reason why Avraham came out. Haran had no value whatsoever. So there was no need or reason to save Haran's life. Because even Avraham himself was only saved because it was necessary, because without him living, there wouldn't have been a Jewish people, which is unrelated to Haran's reality. We find something very interesting. Avraham Avinu had a nephew, Lot. Although God said to him, leave your homeland, leave your birthplace, leave your family. Who came along with Avraham? Lot, his nephew. Lot was the son of Haran, the one who perished in the kiln. And the Orach Chaim HaKodesh makes a point. Avram was told, separate from your family. So how did he allow Lot to tag along? Lot is his nephew. You have to make the break. But he didn't make the break at that point. So the Orach Chaim HaKodesh explains that because he would have naturally not taken him, but Lot, his nephew, forced himself upon his uncle that he wanted to come along. And at that point, he didn't want to send him off. Later, they separated. When they came back, the story with the wealth and the shepherds of Avram, the shepherds of Lot, they were fighting and arguing about stealing grazing land, which was not theirs. We'll discuss that later in the future. But when they separated, what did Avram say to Lot? If you go to the right, I will go to the left. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. I'm always here for you. And if you ever find yourself in a bind, I will come to save you. And he did. He was captured by the four mightiest kings. And when they captured him, it was only to bait Avram, to draw him into battle and to kill him. And Avram went to war. He went with his Eliezer's servant to war, and he defeated the four mightiest kings. How does one individual with a handful of men defeat the four mightiest powers of the world? He had to resort to multiple miracles. You know what happened after he was the victor? He was worried that because he merited all these miracles and he resorted to these miracles, he depleted all his merits. That's what he was worried about. So the obvious question is, why did he make such a level of commitment? If Lot himself is a bad person, he chose to go to Sodom, so what does that say about him? He moved into a brothel and worse than that. Why should Avraham Avinu, and the man's a thief, disrespectful, but yet Avram's willing to put up and tolerate his misbehavior and says, I'm there for you no matter what. Even if it means I'm going to forfeit my share in the world to come. Why? Why did Avram make that level of commitment to his nephew, who's a bad guy? Disrespectful on an exaggerated level. Defiant on an exaggerated level. Now, Lot's father was Haram, who went into the kiln. Although he didn't merit to be saved, because he never went in to die. When he went into the kiln, he went in to go, as Avram went in and came out, he thought he was taking a stroll, That's what he thought. He's going to a sauna with the heat turned up. That's what he thought. But factually, it was more than a sauna. He was incinerated in there because he went in that God should perform a miracle on his behalf. But he's not worthy of that because he's not going in to give his life. But even though that may be true, who was the first person in the history of existence who gave his life to sanctify God's name? After everything said and done, why did Haran die? Public knowledge, world on global level, because he was not willing to bow to the idol. He was not willing to act as a pagan. He gave his life for monotheism. The first human being in the history of existence to die on behalf of God. You know what that is? Avram has a brother, Haran, who died on behalf of God to sanctify God's name. That was the outgrowth of that. I owe him everything. And because I owe him everything, because God lived for God's glory, there's nothing I will not do for his son. I'm committed to him to the hilt. Even if it means putting my share in the world to come in jeopardy, it doesn't make a difference. That's why Avram made that level of commitment to Lot, regardless of his being a bad person, makes no difference. I have a debt of gratitude to his father. If you owe a father, you're indebted to a father, and the father dies, even if the son is a bad person, the debt has to be paid to the heir. Avram had that debt of gratitude to pay to the heir, which is Lot. Regardless, he's a bad person because his father was the first human being ever to publicly sanctify God's name.